Matthew chapter 8. So we've just come down, and as we followed Jesus, we've just come down from the Sermon on the Mount. He has said a lot. You'll see sometimes even biblical scholars say, that was only a 12-minute sermon. And I say that in a goofy voice because those people are being goofy. They call themselves scholars and know nothing about the sermon. The Sermon on the Mount was days. Days. What we have are the things that the Spirit distilled from all of those conversations as the most important core truths that the body of Christ would need until the Lord comes. One scholar put it that the Sermon on the Mount is short because he meant for every believer to have it memorized and to have it in their heart and to meditate on it for the rest of their lives. When Gandhi was betrayed by people who called themselves Christians, he said, I love Jesus, but your people not so much. That's a rewording, but that's what he said. And yet he still carried a copy of the Sermon on the Mount with him throughout his life. Isn't that something? These are powerful words and powerful truths. And they must have been absolutely incredible as people got to sit there and hear Jesus speak them. They came from across Judea. That's like us walking to San Antonio. Think about that. They didn't walk for 12 minutes. They walked to be with Jesus. They walked to hear every word he said, those that we do not hear and do not read because they were between Jesus and them. Answers to their questions in all these different areas that he talks about. Further teaching to help them really take it home and really understand it. And that's what we seek when we come to Jesus. None of us should ever seek a soft Jesus who does 12 minutes and leaves us alone the rest of our lives. Right? We are people who want to see him teach us every moment, every day, and change us. And sometimes that requires coming off the mountain or off our high horse and meeting him in the valley. And this moment in Matthew chapter 8 is one of those moments. We don't have, in this first story, a reaction. We don't see what people thought about what happened. We don't see what the Pharisees, who were always seemingly nearby, criticizing and sniping, we don't have that, but we probably know. We see enough of it. We see enough of it in the rest of the Gospels. We kind of know how they would have reacted. Instead, what we have is just a nice distilled picture. It's Jesus, it's a leper, and it's what Jesus does. And that's what we're going to look at this morning, okay? So Matthew chapter 8, I'm going to start it's there. There you go, 1 through 4. It's a short little passage. Could have taken these three events all at once, but there's too much in each one for us to do that. So we're just going to look at 1 to 4. Let's read this together. This will be from the NIV. It is in the U version if you use that. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." Immediately, he was healed or cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." That's it. That's what we've got. But there's a lot there. As Jesus came down, I would imagine for him that it was like it is for us a lot of times. When we come down from some mountaintop experience, maybe you've been out at Lake Cisco at camp. A lot of you go out there, and maybe some of you are older, but you've gone your whole lives, first as a student, then a camper, then as a counselor, maybe still as a counselor, as a cook, as a volunteer, a teacher, whatever. And you come back from those moments, and you're on a spiritual high, and it doesn't happen every time, but it happens a lot of the time. You come back home, and what is waiting to meet you? You can always hope to carry that high a long ways, and what happens every time? Something is there. There's something that happens that just slams right into you and takes you off of what could have been, you thought, this will carry me for weeks. And instead, by 3 in the afternoon, you've been met by things that were hard or challenging or literally knocked you off your feet. And it happens. Every time we really believe, all right, I'm going to get it together. I'm going to go do great things for the Lord. You can guarantee Satan is right there. It makes the target bigger. Now, that shouldn't scare us from having those times. It shouldn't scare us from having those commitments. What it ought to do is convict us that we're on the right path, that we're headed in the right direction, and we will not bend for Him. Right? That's what it ought to do. That's not always what happens. And so we come down the mountain, and even, listen, Jesus had this temptation given to Him many times. In those moments, we will have people come to us, and they will either be with problems or they will be with needs, and we'll get the wind knocked out of our sails. You know what you sound like when that shows up on your screen, right? That text or that call or that email, and it's just that, and you feel like you lost the whole mountaintop, don't you? You know what that's like. We respond to that in different ways. Sometimes it's a sigh, but there's no resentment. There's no fear. There's just, I was hoping for a few more days before I had to deal with something like that, right? You're ready to meet it. You want to help the person, or you want to do, or you want whatever. You're ready, but you still just kind of, you know? We've all been there. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, trust me, you're going to look back on this someday. You go, oh, that's what he was talking about. Because it comes to us all. It absolutely comes to us all. How do we deal with it? What do we do? As Christians and disciples of Christ, our how to deal with it ought to always be, I'm going to do what Jesus did. It's not just a catchy phrase. It's not just a bracelet. It is our confessed lifestyle and commitment. When we went into the water, we said this is a death to doing it our way. And then too many of us fall right back into that, don't we? Instead, it was supposed to be, and when we come out of the water, from here on out, it is, I will do what Jesus did. I will do as Jesus did, and I will do it to the glory and honor of Jesus. That's our commitment, right? And if it's not, well, we'll do that again then later in the service, and we'll do it again and recommit. That's what it's supposed to be. Jesus does set us an example here. I said that He struggles with this. You know, when He comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, He comes down to the exact kind of situation I've described. He comes down after God has, shown the 3 apostles, this is definitely the Son of God, and you were to listen to Him. After they have proven, after God, the Spirit, and the Son have proven to them He is the Messiah at the top of the mountain, and after He has talked with Moses and Elijah about what is about to come in the crucifixion and the resurrection and the coming kingdom of God, He comes down to a group of apostles who have been so wrapped up in themselves that they're trying to do Jesus' work in their own name. We know that that's what was going on because that's why it wasn't working. And this poor father, distraught over his child who's dealing with an evil spirit, is basically being drugged through extra fire and extra hell because of disciples who are going about it for all the wrong purposes and ways. And Jesus comes down, and it's just, you can see it when you read that in Luke 9. You can just see it. When Jesus even dealt with that, He did say, you people. He did. But He still healed the child. He still did the right thing. He loved. He was compassionate. He was kind. He was patient. He was forgiving. And He didn't let it take Him off course to be a selfish Jesus, which is quite the oxymoron. He was still Jesus. In this moment, He comes down the mountain with all these people who have gathered up over the days. He goes up with just His disciples. By the time He comes down, it appears there's a very large crowd. And he comes down, and it's been an incredible time. He's been able to relay things to people that will rock the world from then until he comes back. And in all of that, he comes down, and here's this guy. Now, I don't think he was impatient about this in the least. I don't think he was disappointed by this in the least. But sometimes we are. Sometimes we are. The man cries out to him. We're going to look first at Jesus' response. We'll look at the man in a second. But the man cries out to him, if you're willing, you can heal me. You can fix me. You can cleanse me if you're willing. And I always wonder how that landed on Jesus, because we only have 2 short sentences. One's 3 words, one's 2 in English, of his response to this man immediately. And then he'll give him some instructions later. First words out of Jesus' mouth, I am willing. Isn't that incredible? I am willing. How many times have we come down from the mountain, or how many times have we been trying to focus on God, and people then get in our way? And we think that's a distraction, and we think that that's a problem, and we think that's something to fix, or we think it's something to avoid. There are 2 kinds of people that are going to approach us the way that this leper approached Jesus. How does Jesus respond to him? Those 2 kinds of people. You have people who are like a leper. Everything that is a problem with them is really obvious, right? Or at least it's obvious, you think, to you. We're not nearly the judges of character we think we are. We ought to repent of even trying. That's God's job. But we see sometimes very openly the wounds of people, don't we? Some people wear them on their sleeve, and sometimes, if we're not careful, as Christians, we will fault them for that. We will tell them that that's a problem. We will say, we don't want to hear your problems. And in that moment, we are not Jesus. Jesus never looks at a leper and says, get away from me. Jesus never looks at a leper and tells that leper, you really ought to cover that up and maybe go somewhere else. We don't do that around here. We're not like that around here. We don't like your kind of people. Jesus never, ever says that. Instead, he does a really remarkable thing. In this one, we don't have this part, but in other times where he's healing a leper, and one in particular, he reaches out, and the writer then very specifically says he reaches out and he touches the man. Why would you do that? He's a leper. And often as Christians, we look at that sort of an event and we say, kind of like Simon, when Mary comes in and cries over Jesus and washes his feet, anoints him. We, like Simon the Pharisee, go, oh, if he knew what kind of a sinner she is. And that's not our job. That story wasn't told to say this is what people in the church ought to look like. It was told to rebuke us when we do. How did Jesus respond? He defended her. He said, do you see this woman? She hasn't stopped washing my feet. You didn't do that. You never washed my feet. She hasn't stopped. Look at her. Lepers. Mary, who was not a leper but wore her scars on the surface. It's all really obvious. And it's not our job to judge. It's our job to have compassion. It's our job to provide a spiritual home and a place for healing. It's our job to provide acceptance. If we are afraid of people who are too different from us, or afraid from people who struggle with things other than the ones we do, then in that fear we're not being Jesus. Jesus never sees people like that and goes, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. That guy running naked and screaming in the cemetery toward him and the disciples. The disciples seemed to shirk back. Jesus didn't. He healed. He rebuked the demons. He sat down with the man. He listened to the man. The woman at the well. He doesn't say, well, I'm not going to ask this lady for water. She's clearly got too much mess in her life for us to be compatible. That's what other people said. The apostles show up and go, what you talking to her for? They were Church of Christ people. What you talking to her for? Not Jesus. Jesus changed her life. And the biggest thing that she says when she goes back and bears testimony to her community, he talked to me about everything I'd ever done. He knew me. And he cared. You think our world isn't waiting for Christians that are like that? They got to know me, and they didn't shun me, run from me, restrict me, move me away from them. They embraced me. They cared for me. They loved me. They saved me. They brought me to Jesus. That's what Jesus is setting an example of. And so when this man runs over to him and says, if you're willing, you could heal me. He doesn't say, hey, the law says for you to stand back. He doesn't buy security cameras. He says, I am willing. Be clean. He changes his life. That's the work of gospel people. It always will be. And anything else is, as you were saying, it's off mission, because that is our mission. I want you to look at this picture for a second. In other accounts of dealing with a leper, Jesus does indeed reach out and touch the man. When they made this particular movie that you can get these scenes from, they incorporated what Jesus seems to do all the time. Look at where he's touching him in this picture. Me? Is my head in the way? My whole body? Look at the guy. I've been on a tether so long that now the microphone works and I don't know how to move. Okay? Look at this. He reaches and touches the guy's wrapped hand. He's probably missing fingers, well, they're not in there, because this is leprosy. He touches him where it hurts the most to let him know he's about to be healed and that he's loved. What if instead of running from people's wounds, we embrace the work of Jesus and connect where they hurt? That's what they come to you for. That's what they come to us for. This is our mission. This is our promise to Jesus of what we will become and of what we will do, and anything less is to join the rebellion against the will of God. Let's look at the guy. He addresses Jesus in a way that I find fascinating. Go back up to verse 2. It says, a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. There's a way in which we can kind of overblow this. We assume that this guy already completely understood that Jesus is the Messiah. And maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. We really don't have that information. We don't know how deeply he meant this. What we do know is what the word means and how he used it. Okay? And words mean things. He calls this man Lord, and it's that same Greek word of kurios that the school in Guatemala City is named after. And it means somebody who is in authority and recognized as being in authority. So what this man does, regardless of how deeply he does or doesn't understand that Jesus is the Christ, the promised one, the anointed one, and the Messiah, regardless of that, he knows that this man carries an authority in himself that is from God, that is great enough that he trusts this guy can heal me. From the very first word, he gets who Jesus is. In that sense, he is an authority. That's important for us, because the reaction of the people who heard the Sermon on the Mount was the same. Back up in verses 28 to 29. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. And that's something we always focus, even as Christians, on the miracles. They were amazed at what he said. And they recognized that he taught as one who had what? Authority. They recognized a Lord when they saw one. Because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So this man at least had that deep a response and an understanding. Says, you have the authority to fix this. Faith is not just believing that God has an ability. Faith is believing that God has the authority in our life. This goes back to the way, the truth, and the life. He is our authority. He is the authority. What he says goes. Where he leads, we follow. How he says to deal with it, we do. And anything less is our disobedience to the Lord. And that's how this man approaches him. It's a spirit of humility and a spirit of recognition of who he really is. So the man says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. I think sometimes we look at that as doubt. And I don't really think that's what's going on. Because he addresses him first as one in authority, one who has the ability, and says, if you're willing. It's not doubt. Sometimes people approach him with doubt. It's understandable. This is not this man. It's not fear. He is going in with an understanding that his healing is possible because Jesus has that authority, but is also subject to the will of the one who is in authority. He believes that he is not in a place to demand, but a place to ask, to seek, and to knock. And maybe he had heard those words. Maybe it had reached the leper colony that this teacher is saying, if you'll ask, it'll be given to you. And a leper is sitting out there and said, he said, what now? If you seek, you will find. Oh, there's no way. If you knock, the door will be opened. I'm going to give it a shot. So he goes to Jesus, and he asks, and he seeks, and he knocks. And he does it humbly. He doesn't go in there saying, you got to give me this. You said, I heard you said, ask, seek, and knock. You got to do it. He's not arrogant. He's humble. And he submits. Look at his posture. Look at how he approaches him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him. When's the last time you knelt? And I mean physically knelt. When were you on your knees for real? We've become, and I'm not just talking Church of Christ, I'm talking Americans, okay? We've become a people who find a problem with a knee. And our only problem is that we don't use them. We are people who come before the Lord in humility. And if we're not, then we need to be. Do you know there actually used to be churches of Christ with kneelers? You might think that was only a Catholic thing. When I was a student in Lubbock, the church that I was at had kneelers in it. They made those people sit at the back. Yeah, isn't that terrible? So they wouldn't be a distraction to their worship. If your worship is that easily distracted, that is not the kneeler. That's not the kneeler. If somebody getting on their knees, if somebody crying, if somebody raising their hands, if somebody's praying while the rest of us are singing, distracts you from your worship, I'm going to challenge you to see, who were you worshiping? Because Jesus worshipers, in spirit and truth, don't find those things to be a distraction. They find them to be the fulfillment of true worship. They put them at the back. We need to put it at the front of our hearts, to be humble before our God. That's one of the reasons I like that song, Behold Our God, which was fun last week. And I think we outsang them last week, you know? I think it was awesome. because of that spirit of being in awe of our God. So much that being in awe of our wants and conveniences goes away. It's an incredible thing when that happens. This man comes to Jesus and there's none of that. No demanding, no entitlement. You have to give it to me. Jesus, you owe it to me. There's no owing. There's no owing. If there was, it would be on our part and we would not be able to pay it back. There's no owing. So he comes before God and he just lays his request there. God, I know you can. Lord, I know you're able. You have the authority, Lord. You can do this if you want to. And Jesus says what? Oh, I want to. I want to. What if that was us? What if our want to was so focused on doing the will of God, we didn't even notice the leprosy? We just noticed the connection within the eyes as we look at people and see their hearts. What if we saw really challenging situations that people are going through, things we can't even understand or even know how they're even breathing as they go through them? What if when we see those things, those aren't turnoffs, those aren't distractions, those aren't inconveniences or reasons, well, maybe they need to go to another church. What if those were the very things that God put them right in front of you for? Jesus doesn't put anybody in front of you by accident. God is sovereign and God is providential, and he's brought them into your life for a reason and a purpose. I don't know about you, but I don't want to blow that. I don't want to stand before the Lord and have to answer why he kept bringing people and I kept ignoring them. Do you? I'd rather go to hell for experience or for helping somebody that was a lost cause and, in the world's point of view, a distraction. There's no going to hell for that, by the way. But I would rather than to have to answer, I sent you that man, I sent you that woman, and y'all were too worried about that. They spilled coffee on the carpet and you found them an inconvenience and thought, oh, we got to get rid of that guy. That's not Jesus. That's not missions. That's not glory. That's sin. So who are we going to be when these people show up in front of us? Look at that guy. So I said there were two kinds of people. There's this kind of guy who shows up and all of his scars and wounds and mess, they're all so visible. And then on top of that, the poor guy, according to the law, has to say, unclean, unclean, everywhere he goes. Jesus doesn't reject him. Jesus embraces him. There's another kind of person. Some people become experts at hiding their scars. Decade after decade, they can hide their scars. You know why they do that? They're not trying to lie to you most of the time. They're not trying to keep you from finding out except for a particular motive. They're not being deceptive. You know what they're doing? They're seeing in people sometimes a judgmentalism that scares them. They see a distance that they're kept at that scares them. They're afraid of being seen. Okay, my heart's pretty tender this week, so I'm going to have to be careful because I really don't like crying, okay? I don't. It'll happen. So if it happens, show grace. Years ago, years ago, I shouldn't have looked at Tanya. Let me go over. I'm going to talk to this side. Years ago, we were foster parents. We had several kids that came in and out of our home. We started out as therapeutic foster parents. That's kids that have seen the worst of the worst abuse, need 100% of the time supervision. And these kids can't go to a friend's house. The friend has to come to yours. It's that sort of a deal, okay? Heavy-duty foster care. The training for that was miserable. It shows you things that go on in the world in ways in which ways in which children are treated that criminals should not ever endure, much less a child. One of those kids, and I've mentioned her before, one of those kids was a little girl named Riley. She was a 9-month-old baby. Okay. I mentioned her one time before, and I cried then, so I'm not allowed to cry now. Okay. So this is why I don't talk about her. She came in at 9 months. She had been starved to the point that she weighed, and all the mothers will know, she weighed 9 pounds at 9 months. She didn't have the muscle to support her back. It was crooked as a snake. Her hair was already turning brittle and orange and falling out of her head. And we had to teach her in the first night how to eat it from a bottle again. Her tongue was raw. And the saddest part was that when you would look at her, when anybody would look at her, she would hide behind the blanket with what little strength she had. Okay? Her scars were visible. Her life was not an inconvenience. And we did everything we could, and that kid's health and everything turned around. We had another kid, healthy as could be, strong, quick runner. To look at him, you'd think everything in the world was just fine. But too, he had problems. He was one of our therapeutic kids. He had been abused in ways I'm not going to talk about in a sermon. Angry, unforgiving, suffering from detachment syndrome, and broken. To this day, that kid, when he came to our house at 7 years old, is one of the angriest people I've ever known in my life. You'd never know at first. You'd never know. No idea where he ended up. Not an inconvenience. He was really hard to deal with. Very hard to deal with. But he had scars no one saw. He still bears scars. He will for the rest of his life, that probably no one will see. Some of you may know that experience. You're dealing with it right now. Jesus sees. He knows. He cares. And as people of God, we've got to be people willing to see, willing to know, and willing to care. People need to find in us a place where they can lay their burdens down and find nothing but compassion and care and prayer for one another. Because that's who Jesus is. And that's what he did when people came, as he comes down the mountain multiple times and finds inconveniences. He saw only an opportunity for love and for care. That has to be us. And anytime we're off of that, we're off of Jesus. We're not who we ought to be. Now, I do have 3 questions that shift gears for just a second that we have to ask, because this is why all this matters. 3 easy questions. I put them to you before. This is a great, simple way for you to teach people Christ. It's a challenge to Christians who've been Christians for decades and people who only found out about Jesus this afternoon. 3 questions when we see Jesus heal. What could man do about the problem? It's the 1st century. They can't do anything about leprosy except exile the people. It's like the worst solution ever as far as their needs. But that's all they could do to protect the other people. It wasn't because they were horrible. That was all you could do to protect the other people. And this was true up until the early part of most of our lifetime who are in this room. When I was a kid, they were still talking on 60 Minutes about this island off of Hawaii. It's not a deal anymore like that, but it was still. About problems of lepers in India, still sometimes an issue. What could man do? They couldn't do a thing except distance themselves from him. Keep that as the contrast. All man could do was step back. Jesus, what did he do? He stepped forward and stepped up, and he heals the man. And he did more than we could do. No other man could do this. Who does that make Jesus? It makes him the Son of God, doesn't it? It makes him divine. It makes him Lord. But his followers will, to the best of their God-given ability, do the same. We will step forward, not back. We will step up, not back. And we will save as many souls as possible in the name of Jesus, because that's what we committed ourselves to the day that we went into the water.